America a better place. He wrote a list of 9 principles and 12 values. Many people started creating 9/12 groups. In the last 7 weeks, the IRS has confirmed that they were targeting groups with Tea Party, Patriots in their names, and groups with 9/12 in their names. The first principle of the 9/12 project is America is good. The 9th principle is the government works for me. I do not answer to them, they answer to me. The government fears us when we understand that we hold the power in this country. Glenn Beck helped teach so many Americans that we do hold the power. Please join me in welcoming a man who has taught about the Constitution, who is standing with citizens across this land, showing how we can exercise our civic authority, and who is fighting for freedom, standing with us today, Glenn Beck.
Because our tactics have got to change.
Amen.
If we want our country to change, we have to change fundamentally as people.
Yes.
Today, inside, they dedicated a brand new statue to another American giant. This one was Frederick Douglass.
Yes.
He was a man that was born into slavery, but knew instinctively that he was not a slave. To keep a man a slave, you have to do much of the same as the old circus masters used to do around the turn of the last century with elephants. You'd clamp heavy chains around their legs, and then you would stake it to the ground. Then you would take the elephant and you would beat it, and you would terrorize it. And after a while, you could unstake the chain. The elephant would just give up. He would no longer move. Just the mere rattle of the chain was enough to scare the elephant. And so they would give up, and they would do whatever it was the circus master required. Frederick Douglass was lucky enough to grow up in a house where he was taught to read and to write and to think. He knew that God did not make men to be masters over other men. He knew that God did not intend any man to impose unrighteous dominion over any man or beast. It is time that Americans remind themselves of this truth again and rise up against the intimidation before the handful of peanuts from our new political circus masters are considered kindness instead of the symbol of evil cruelty which they are. In the building that stands behind me and in front of you, right now they are excusing the storing of all data, all phone calls, all financial transactions, geo-tracking. They are doing it in the name of our safety while allowing anyone to cross our borders either on foot or in underground tunnels without any worry or consequence. In the building behind me, they have not suspended or fired, but have promoted those at the IRS who rattled the chains of control to any group that disagreed with its policies. And now they are pushing misery and death through the so-called Arab Spring, country after country, and now they are plotting a new war with Syria. This again will bring nothing but death and destruction the world over, and the price that we will pay will be too high. We are told that we have to pick sides to arm those, but those people that we are choosing to arm are so far down on the scale of decency that even Vladimir Putin this week asked if Americans knew that the people we were arming were actually eating their enemies on the battlefield. The fact that Putin had to even ask that question, and the fact that most Americans didn't even know or had seen the video of that commander that we are arming now engaging in those things, is an indictment not only of our Congress, our president, but our media, and quite honestly, ourselves. I called some friends to stand with me today, some modern-day spiritual giants. They are from different faiths. They are from different backgrounds. They have some different views, I'm sure. But we all have one thing in common. We don't recognize our country anymore.
Yes.
And because we know that God is just, we tremble for the future of our children.
Yes.
But we wonder, and we want to ask all Americans, is this country even worth defending anymore? USA. It is harder to defend the principles that we don't even know. What is it we stand for? Who are we? And will most of our citizens even care or notice as the chain is clamped around her leg again? What is it that will be written about this generation? What is it that will be said about us? The greatest generation has almost completely passed. It is us now that historians will watch to see what we will do. Will it be said of us, this generation, that no one called for justice, no one pleaded for truth, that we trusted in vanity and spoke in lies, that we conceived mischief and brought forth iniquity? What is it that we even believe anymore? And where did we get these ideas that now seem to be so popular with our fellow citizens? Our forebears came to these shores not for free stuff, but for freedom. Our forebears came here to make their own way, to create a different life. They came here because they knew that God made them free, and they were free to pursue their own happiness and take responsibility for their own lives and their own actions. They came here because even though they may have come from different religions, they knew they had the right to worship the God of their understanding the way they chose to worship. There are some things that are still worth believing in, but how many Americans do anymore? How many of us still really believe that the little guy can make it, that every single life has value and is worth living, that honor and integrity do matter, that justice will prevail, if not in this lifetime, surely in the next? America must recognize that God does exist, and that what each of us do and choose to do with every second of our day matters. America must again recognize that it is the meek that shall inherit the earth. Have we forgotten, as we declare ourselves masters of the planet in our arrogance, spread our troops all over the planet, teach the world how to do banking the way we do it in America, even though we can't master our own homes, protect our own neighborhoods, or seemingly balance a simple checkbook ourselves? How grotesque and garish we must appear to those who are looking in. I, for one, still believe in the simple, silly notion of truth, justice, and the American way. But we have to admit to ourselves that since our very founding, a good percentage of our fellow citizens closed their eyes to the civil right violations of other Americans. There was only about 10 to 20% of those who fought in the American Revolution. Only about 10 or 20% of the entire population of America was involved. The rest stood out and watched to see what would happen. People, all our history, have said things like, well, I'm okay. Well, I just don't want to think about that. That's kind of a bad thing. Or I'm busy. Or it doesn't personally affect me. Or it can't be as bad as they say. Or even if it is, I'm just one person. And what difference can I make? Nothing has changed except the chairs at the table. Someone is always on the losing end of the stick of power. Blacks are the most obvious. The Chinese, the Native American. But let's not forget the Irish, or the Catholics, or the Mormons, or the Jews. And now it seems those on the short end of the stick are all those of faith that will not conform. For those that think men foolishly make progress collectively, let me warn you, history teaches you couldn't be more wrong. We are redeemed one man at a time. There is no family pass ticket or park hopping pass to life. It is one ticket, one ride, one person at a time. Man does not vanquish hatred or bigotry. Hatred and bigotry continues to move. From the blacks to the Irish to the atheists to the Christians. But if you recognize this, you will notice also that there are always a few leaders that stand up. Ben Franklin, John Quincy Adams, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. They knew that the march toward freedom never ends, and man must be vigilant and pray less with his lips and more with his legs. Those few people inspired just handfuls of people. They never forgot that truth, justice, and freedom are the well springs of the water of man's civil rights, and so they must be upheld for all men. Those that you don't know, those that you don't like, most importantly, those that you do know and really don't like. Because if their rights are violated, all rights are violated. In the past, these historic stands in America, which we now call civil rights movements, were all done by a small but dedicated portion of citizens, which led to great and profound changes in our nation. But those movements always started in the same place, the church, and with people of God. And usually not the popular churches. Usually not the preachers that everybody loved to hear. They were the preachers that put it all on the line. They were the preachers like these men who knew they were born free, but that freedom comes at a profound price, profound responsibility. People that stood against injustice, hatred, and bigotry. Our pulpits in this country have gone silent out of fear, out of arrogance, or out of apathy. Their faith is now found in the wisdom of man and not the power of God. For some preachers losing their tithing checks, or maybe it's the gold Rolex, has become more important than losing man's freedom. Whatever the reason, they are no longer willing to call evil by its name. And there is no vision. And when there is no vision, the people shall perish. May I humbly suggest a vision. Martin Luther King knew the answer, and he lost a lot more than congregants on his march. Students today all across our country are taught that his vision probably came from Gandhi, or maybe that idea came from some progressive philosopher in the early 20th century. Martin Luther King's vision of although we all be free men, when we choose to make ourselves servant to all, we gain the more, did not come from a progressive philosopher. Believe me. Let's get a couple of things straight. What MLK and Gandhi and Lincoln, what they all did was not progressive or new. It was ancient. Hollywood, Woodstock, and the hippie culture. It was not the source of the power of the 1960s civil rights movement. It was God and God alone.
That's right.
It was God that led those men and women risking their lives over that bridge in Selma, Alabama. Not Janis Joplin, not Columbia University, and it sure the hell wasn't a labor union. It wasn't John Lennon that taught people about peace and peaceful resistance. That job fell on the shoulders of a Jewish carpenter a long time ago. The rights that so many Americans ignorantly preach about, whine about, aren't even theirs. They don't belong to us. Those rights belong to God. We are mere caretakers of those rights. They belong to Him and given to us for stewardship. And they're pretty important. And they're pretty obvious. In fact, they were so obvious that we used to say they were self-evident. For those people who are currently under indoctrination in our universities, let me explain self-evident. That means they're so simple that humans don't even have to have them explained to them. You know. You don't need to be taught. You instinctively know that you have a right not to be executed without trial, not to be held without charge, not to be searched without warrant, or spied upon without cause. The government is no longer the protector of those rights. They are the chief violator of those rights. And so we must stand and protect them. When we are told that the IRS, the EPA, the ATF, the FBI, or any of the others, when we're told it's okay for them to hassle, threaten, or intimidate others because of their skin color, their religion, their political belief, we stop being the country all of us want to build and start being the country all of the world should fear. The long train of abuses regarding these rights are exactly the same abuses that Martin Luther King marched against. And they're the very same rights that our dusty founders preached against. Men make progress, but man never changes. Man loves power. Man loves money. No matter the skin color, no matter the party, no matter the religion, no matter the income level. These systems, I stood up there last week and I looked down at how the streets point directly to the Speaker of the House. It's intoxicating. The symbol of our nation make men drunk with power, and then they justify their lust for more by claiming they're public servants. I realized last night when I came and landed in this city, and I thought, I actually like Vegas more than this city. I realized the only difference between Las Vegas and Washington, D.C. is at least Vegas has the decency to admit it's full of crooks and hookers. It's time to sober up. Too many of the Republicans, too many of the Democrats, too many Americans have played us, lied, stolen, and the getaway car was driven by the mainstream media.
That's right!
A media that can no longer with a straight face. A media no longer with a straight face can claim the role of journalist. Let me tell the media something. Journalism implies that you print or run stories the powerful do not like. What you are doing is nothing more than public relations. We are not violent. We are not racist. We are not anti-immigrant. We are not anti-government. But we will not be silent another day more. And those who wish to use unrighteous dominion over mankind are not enemies of ours. They are enemies of his. And I have a sneaking suspicion he's not going to be silent much longer either. We as a people no longer accept the lies, the corruption, the information and data gathering. It is evil. It is un-American. It is wrong. We come here today to send a very clear message to surround all of those who wish to stand and break that cycle of corruption. We will use ourselves as shields, if need be, to protect those who are in the system, the elected official or the whistleblowers, with the courage to stand and tell the truth. I come here today as a father and as a citizen to respectfully, but with the power of the Spirit, demand to be treated as an equal member of society. I am a man, and I will be treated as a man. I answer to only one king, and his kingdom will come. His will be done. We have chosen sides. We choose God. And America as a nation must do the same as well. We come here again to declare our independence, to reaffirm our founding principles. We as a nation, in our documents and again today, acknowledge there is a Creator. We acknowledge that He gives us certain inalienable rights. We declare that government exists primarily to protect those natural God-given rights. We declare that God has established right and wrong. We declare that He is just. And therefore, man must pay for his mistakes either now on earth or through his justice later. But there is no such thing as social justice. Only God can balance things out. And we are bold enough to declare today in this city that we are not God. We are honest and decent men, and we will fight for and do our very best to establish equal justice for all mankind. There is no such thing as collective salvation. However, we are going to be judged on how we treat each other, how we live our lives, how we treat our fellow brothers and sisters, especially those that mistreat us. Thus, we must serve them, help them, with charity toward all. Malice toward none is what Lincoln said, but God said it slightly different. Vengeance is mine. Anyone who speaks of punishing political enemies, anyone who tells you about vengeance is not only on the wrong side, it is evil. Clear evil, and we have a responsibility to declare it as such. America, your job has just begun. It is time to rise up and boldly declare those same self-evident truths that changed the world so many years ago, and demand that those truths remain the basis of our laws. My civil rights will not be trampled. And I say this not for me, not for my children, but all men that yearn to be free. Those who make our Apple products at a place called Foxconn, where they are so enslaved they throw themselves off the top of the building. I say these for those who languish in prisons in Cuba, in North Korea, in Venezuela. I say that for those homosexuals who are currently being stoned to death in the streets of Egypt and Iran, while our so-called civil rights leaders hold coffee clatches with third graders at the White House. I will not stand for my job, for my house, or for my income. But I will stand for those immigrants who came here the right way, to not have their dreams destroyed by a group of elites in this town, increasing the competition at the lowest rung of the ladder while keeping the brightest and best minds out of the visa pool, allowing for little competition at the very top. It's wrong. We will not pervert a woman's right and twist it into a gross, silent defense of abortion doctors in Philly and Houston, while turning our eyes from the forgotten women who have never had the civil right to walk alone on a street without a man, or drive a car in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, or even those who currently cower in fear with their faces covered in our own country, in Florida, Virginia, New York, and Minnesota. We will not waste another second of our precious life shadowboxing the demons of the past when the fight to end actual slavery is still happening today. Call it what you want, but those who make your iPad in China, those who make your cute little Mao purses, they are the very people you claim to care so much about. And they are the ones yearning to breathe free. And worse yet, the oldest form of human degradation that has been seen, the sex slave trade. It currently holds in its coils over 2 million children. The biggest source of this evil is on our border in Arizona. I have spoken to lawmakers in Mexico, and they have begged America to please seal the border so we don't sell more children into a sex slave industry. press will mock and say what they will, and they will also say, how dare men declare themselves to be the next Martin Luther King or civil rights leader. How blind people are to believe that the civil rights movement ever ended. The civil rights movement never ends, and it never will. It has been marching on since the beginning of time. Where Martin Luther King started is where Gandhi left off. And where he picked it up, Abraham Lincoln left it off. And before that, it was Whitfield all the way back to Moses. It is never too late. We are not at the mercy. We are not at the mercy of these events. We can change the course of history, and we must. We can stand against the dangerous arc of our country's story today. But we need more people like you, willing to sacrifice their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. People willing to stand up and tell the truth. The last century was a century of genocide, where collectivists, National Socialists, communists, evil rose up time and time again and swallowed up the lives of millions. It happens every time. Man says the collective is more important than the individual. That one phrase, the collective is more important than the individual, that one phrase every time is a license to kill anyone deemed standing in the way of progress. But last century, evil met its match, and goodness eventually prevailed. Martin Luther King and Bonhoeffer and Lech Walesa gave their lives, or much of their lives, in the pursuit of human rights. They took the side of justice over injustice. They held aloft the torch of freedom to push out the darkness of hate. These men and women lived difficult lives. They often lived shortened lives. They were born to relative privilege. They chose to take on suffering. They didn't want to martyr themselves. They would have been happy to live the rest of their lives. But to the righteous, there is no comfort when evil has taken root. The cause of human rights has been taken over in this country by a group of clownish organizations who share very little with the individuals who led the movement in the 60s. Human rights was once a cry for justice. Now it's merely used as a threat. These organizations have become bullies, grotesque parodies of the principles they pretend to represent. They criticize free nations and spare the unfree. They are nearly comical in their double standards. They are no more the enforcers of civil rights. They are the attack dogs who wish to keep men confined in spaces they design. Whatever moral authority they once had is spent. Their time is up, and we dismiss them. I beg those with eyes and ears to heed the call, and to begin to train yourself now under the exact same system used by Martin Luther King. Search his words out. You will find, if you're younger, that your history professors and civil rights activists have lied to you. They've left out the real author of those words. Read them. Ponder them. I dare you to risk to live them. Even though, if you do, it'll make you a target of the NSA. But having your name on a list as an enemy of theirs may be the safest thing you ever do. Pastors, priests, rabbis, I challenge you. What have you done with your knowledge and priesthood power that those without that priesthood privilege have not done? If you can't answer that with power every single day, what good are you? Average citizens and college students, I challenge you. Martin Luther King didn't take a class. He didn't get a certificate. He didn't go out and get a bunch of permits. He saw injustice. He studied eternal truths. He exercised discipline and love. And he got off his butt and he marched. If you don't find a leader, it's perhaps that you were destined to be the leader. Christians, I believe in the free market system. If your preacher is too afraid to preach it from the pulpit, then maybe you should start preaching it from the street corner. Many are called. Will you answer? Our spiritual body is out of shape, and we need intensive training right now. Turn back to God. Some things are worth believing in. The good guys do win in the end. Evil doesn't stand unless good men don't stand up. The time is now, and we are the people. We must never stop being the shore that others can come to for shelter and hope. But we must realign ourselves with truth. Rise. This is the vision. We must preach good tidings to the meek, bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to those held captive, declare vengeance belongs to God and God alone, give comfort to those that mourn, beauty for ashes, and water the trees of righteousness. We shall not perish. We shall not perish. I know a lot of us don't like to hear the truth. Well, it's too bad. Too late for that. George Washington told us, religion and morality are the only stable and lasting basis of individual life and public policy. If we are to survive, they must be part of our public policy rather than driven from it.
Right.
It is no longer good enough to be a good person. Each of us today must strive to be the next Abraham Lincoln, the next Martin Luther King. It is noble to strive to be the size of that bronze giant that they unveiled today. Frederick Douglass's time was in the 1800s. Martin Luther King's time is past. This is our time. And the long march towards civil rights is here. Stand without fear. Lock arms. Stare down the bullies with the full armor of God. Honor, courage, and love is what is required. They are contagious. Spread the word. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Let us today, as George Washington said, raise a standard that the wise and the honest can repair. The rest of it is in the hands of God. God bless. Thank you.